So, is it true that porn is an addiction? Is porn addiction a real disorder?
High-speed internet pornography is the problem, and he's talking about it. I'm just inclined to stop the video here because this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It is amazing to me that there are some people who don't believe that pornography addiction is a real thing, in spite of how smart or intelligent they might be. So today I'm going to be sharing my reaction to a video by conservative commentator Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire. And he put together a documentary. I think it's called Am I a Woman? I haven't watched it. Or What is a Woman? Is it Am I a Woman? What is a woman? I've seen clips of it and I thought it was very interesting and provocative. It was very, very eye-opening. He seems like an intelligent guy from what I can see. And apparently in this video, all my reaction videos, I have never watched it before. They're sent to me by my team. He claims that pornography addiction does not exist. So let's hop into it. Let's see what the man has to say.
Today, our daily cancellation brings us around full circle. We began the show talking about the efforts to place age restrictions on pornography, efforts that have been furiously protested and denounced by smut peddlers and smut consumers alike, both groups having placed their own satisfaction far above our basic responsibility as human beings to protect children. And we end the show now on a related topic. Now, I make no secret of the fact that, as I mentioned in the opening, that I oppose pornography across the board as a general principle. Yes, I want to see age restrictions put in place, but if I had my way, the entire industry would be dismantled, torn apart, set on fire, and burned to ash while we all gather together and dance around its smoldering corpse. If I could do this by banning pornography entirely, then I would. As I said earlier, porn is nothing but cyber prostitution and can be prohibited under the same pretense and for the same reason that prostitution is prohibited already in most parts of the country.
Okay, strong start. I agree with him on one or two things, and I disagree on others. And I'll share why I do so. First of all, I don't have a problem with pornography, and I think he's painting pornography with very wide strokes. Pornography has always been around. Pornography was drawn on cave paintings. It's very human for people to want to for people to be aroused by viewing other people having sex. And when we understand how powerful those sexual urges are, we also understand that that's never going to go away. It is always going to exist. As long as humans masturbate, there's going to be some form of something called pornography. Where I do agree with him is that pornography in its modern incarnation, high-speed internet pornography, is extremely dangerous and destructive. I've put out so many videos talking about that, but it is leading to moral decay. And the interesting thing is, I'm not a moralizer. I couldn't care what your morals are, but I do understand that a society that has its morals falling apart is a society that is in decline, and so many people are going to suffer as a result of it. Biologically, pornography is a hyperstimuli, which means that our brains are not designed to handle that much stimuli. So when that happens, you don't develop like a normal person. When you take men, young men, for instance, and you realize that most young men's brains aren't fully developed till they are 25 years old, it makes you question what is happening to this generation. I come across men who need Cialis and Viagra in their early 20s. This is very common. This was something that was not necessary for young men. It was men who were in their 60s who needed this. I come across men who do not know how to speak to women, who do not know how to communicate with women, men who are absolutely asexual, men who are struggling with erectile dysfunction, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, men who have no idea how to build intimacy with women. On top of that, pornography rewires your brain. Pornography reduces the amount of gray matter in your prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is in charge of executive function. So that is memory, consolidation, prioritization, and a few other things. So basically, it makes you stupid the more you watch. I agree with him on most of those things. And yes, I'd be actually absolutely fine with completely banning high-speed internet pornography. But I would only be okay with that, knowing that pornography would find another way to thrive hopefully, I wouldn't say in a more healthy way, but in a less destructive way.
But a general porn ban is not going to happen anytime soon, much to my chagrin, which means that we can only chip away at this demonic behemoth piece by individual people deciding to liberate themselves from its clutches. If we're going to land a blow, it will have to be landed by porn consumers deciding to respect themselves and value their own souls enough to do something else with their time and stop watching porn. It's at this point that I'm often told that, well, it's not that simple. Porn users can't just stop. It's an addiction, just like being hooked on drugs. Literally no difference at all.
Okay. So a few things I can already tell from the way he's speaking. Demonic. I think he used another souls. So it looks like he is Christian, probably deeply so, and a conservative Christian, I'm assuming. And he's coming from that place. I agree with him that we all have to take individual responsibility. And I strongly believe that if each man, every single man, let's say at Porn Reboot, who takes the very powerful step of choosing to control his behavior with pornography and not contribute to that industry, each man who's able to do so, that's a massive change, because we have men who are going out into the world, acting a different way, acting responsibly, acting with character, and talking openly about the dangers of pornography. I think that's excellent if more men can do it. But he's kind of heading into that, like, you should be able to do it. It's an easy thing to do. Well, let's just hear what he has to say, because I can see it coming already.
That's what I'm always assured. I heard a lot of this same rationalizing on Twitter this weekend when the subject came up, and one commenter said, quote, "Do you think it's easy for those who are hooked on porn to just simply stop watching porn? Think again. It's an addiction, maybe worse than alcohol and drugs." Another agreed and said, "Matt, I think you're amazing, but you must not have experience with a loved one's addiction. You're right that an addict can just stop if you incentivize them to do so, but it's rarely that easy. It's so much more complicated than that." Another chimed in, quote, "The dopamine release from porn is worse than most drugs. You can't just stop. There are ramifications." Many more where those came from. You get the idea. These are the kinds of things you'll hear anytime this topic is discussed. So is it true that porn is an addiction? Is porn addiction a real disorder? Now, typically critics of the porn industry will say that porn addiction is real because addiction has a negative connotation, and they recognize that porn is a negative thing. So they want to talk about porn addiction. Defenders of the porn industry will deny that porn addiction is real because addiction has a negative connotation. They refuse to recognize that porn is a negative thing. So I find myself on a lonely island because I am certainly not a porn defender, though on the addiction issue, I think that the porn defenders, have arrived at the correct conclusion, even if their motives are totally deranged. Meanwhile, the porn critics have the best intentions, but when it comes to this issue, they're not only wrong, but they are inadvertently making the problem worse. So what is addiction?
Okay, so before he gets into this, maybe I'm not smart enough. I feel like I missed something there. But he's saying that or rather implying that people who are porn critics and who have a problem with pornography have a tendency to use addiction because it has a negative connotation. And that's the interesting thing. He's framing this argument based on this assumption. I'm going to assume, it looks like it's a longer video. I'm going to assume that he's going to make his argument based on this foundation, which is already wrong. Okay. And I think when you guys watch videos like this, you want to do so with a very open mind. The truth is that I am critical. First of all, let's start from the beginning. He's talking about pornography in general. And because he's a conservative Christian, he doesn't care whether it is high-speed internet pornography or not. He's just saying pornography is bad, burn it all. I'm saying pornography will never go away, but high-speed internet pornography is problematic. I'm also a critic, but a critic of high-speed internet pornography, right? So realizing now that this Matt Walsh guy doesn't even understand that high-speed internet pornography is the problem, and he's talking about it, I'm just inclined to stop the video here because this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But I won't, because I know some of you guys might be interested in seeing where this goes. And I'm actually just a little bit curious. So let's just see where it goes. So to be clear, I'm a critic of high-speed internet pornography, but I'm not just using the fact that it is addictive as my only argument, right? I am using the fact that it takes away so much from your life, not just the addictive part of it. It takes away your ability to connect with other people. It takes away a huge part of your humanity. It causes you to view other people as mere objects. There's so many other things I could list, but let's get back to Matt and what he has to say.
The important point about addiction, as it's understood today, is that it is considered a disease. The American Psychiatric Association calls addiction, quote, a complex,
Ooh, I got something to say, but that's
but treatable disease that affects brain function and behavior. The NIH calls it a disease that is, quote, a lot like other diseases like heart disease. Goes on to explain that addiction is a brain disorder. The Mayo Clinic also calls it a disease. As for the nature of this disease, the NHS on its website says this, quote, addiction is defined as not having control over doing, taking, or using something to the point where it could be harmful to you. So addiction then.
Okay, let's pause there. This is so good. I do not believe in the disease model of addiction, just to be absolutely clear. I think that it is a very harmful way to look at something. It is actually not the dictionary definition of a disease. And like he just said, the NHS described addiction as more of as a compulsion, something that you're trying to stop. Despite your best intentions, you're not able to stop doing it. There is no other disease that is described that way. No other disease, right? And here's the most important thing about disease. You have no choice when it comes to a disease. If you have a disease, you have a disease. Okay, I want to make it absolutely clear. But when it comes to a compulsion or addiction, whichever one you want to call it, every addict, everybody struggling with a compulsive disorder has a choice. And you might be like, no, we don't have a choice. If you didn't have a choice, how do I exist? How am I sitting here? If you didn't have a choice, how are there people who have recovered from their heroin addiction? How do they exist? Or people who used to be alcoholics? Because they came to the awareness of the fact that they had a choice. And by coming to that awareness, they could begin the process of doing the healing work that was necessary. They could come to the point where they could start rewiring their brain. I want you guys to understand that the entire disease model was something that was come up. People came up with it because there were no, and still aren't, enough effective ways to treat addiction. So you guys have to understand that there is an industry. It is the addiction recovery industry that uses insurance, that is government funded, that criminals and addicts are mandated to go through these systems. And there are billions of dollars that are circulating. It is in a lot of people and a lot of institutions' best interest to call addiction a disease. But think of the impact that has on you when you call it a disease. And think of actually using common sense, how dumb it is to call something that you have a choice in a disease. You don't have choice with measles. You don't have choice with AIDS. When you catch that, you catch that. And you have to take medication to free yourself of it. When you get a pornography addiction, you have a choice. You can stop. You can have the symptoms go away. They can come, but it is not a disease. Accepting the fact it is a disease means that you are accepting the fact that you are going to live with this forever, because it is classified as a disease that is recurring. It's like a disease like AIDS or a disease like herpes. You're just like, well, it's just going to come back and keep coming back. And that, gentlemen, ladies, that is not true. Back to Matt.
And is a disease that takes away your ability to control your own actions. It is a dependency, a disorder. Now I think talking about any addiction this way can be potentially dangerous, as you're entirely removing free will from the equation. But when it comes to something like heroin addiction, you can see where it might apply. Heroin takes over an addict's brain to such an extent that if they simply just stop taking it one day, they might actually die. I mean, they literally can't stop. Not all at once, anyway. Their body depends on it. Porn is not like this. You lose your internet connection for 3 days and you can't watch porn, you're not going to go into withdrawal.
Ooh, okay. So, unfortunately, he's wrong about this. He used the example of heroin, okay? And you can use the example of anything else. You are receiving something external, an external, let's say, opiate, into your body now adjusts to that certain amount of opiate within your body. And when it is taken away from you, your body now has to function without it. And trying to function without it is what leads to all those withdrawal symptoms. What Matt does not understand is that the same thing happens with pornography, except that the opiates, the chemicals that are released with pornography, are already within us. They are what we call endogenous opiates. That means they are released within us. What you release when you masturbate is an opiate. When you orgasm, excuse me, is an opiate. It's all those endorphins, those feel good chemicals. When you have like a runner's high, those of you who've experienced it, that is an endorphin being released. It's actually not dopamine that is being released. What dopamine is doing is dopamine is a precursor. Dopamine is telling you that this activity that you are doing is going to lead to a positive reward. So you can be addicted both to orgasm, you can be addicted to dopamine, but you can also be addicted to all the different things that precede the release of dopamine and endorphins. Things like norepinephrine, which are released from your adrenal glands, things like adrenaline, that rush that you get. And pornography addiction is also what we call a process addiction versus a substance abuse addiction. A process addiction means that you are addicted to the process of getting to that point. You are not addicted to the substance itself, right? With heroin, your addiction is to the substance itself. Putting the substance in your body immediately, the substance itself causes things to happen within you. The substance itself contains things that are addictive, like the opiates. But when it comes to process addictions, pornography itself is not suddenly releasing endorphins within you, right? What pornography is doing is that it is starting as a process. It is starting with an increase in testosterone, it's starting with an increase in norepinephrine, it's starting with an increase in adrenaline, and then dopamine is released. And the timing of all of this varies according to the level of your addiction. For some people, they go to dopamine release really quickly. For some people, it takes a long time. And if you've been addicted for a while, it takes you a while to release dopamine. So you might end up, when you find yourself binging for a very long time, what you're actually doing is that, or when you're edging, what you're actually doing is your subconscious mind already understands that if it continues down this path, it's going to get to orgasm really quickly. And it understands that there's going to be a refractory period before it can get that hit again. So you edge. And when you edge, what do? When you edge, everybody edges in a different way. When I say in a different way, we're edging in the same way, but internally it's a different process. Some of us edge because we want to catch that release of norepinephrine. That's what our unique biology wants. Others edge for adrenaline, others edge for more dopamine, and some edge simply because they are just looking forward to the orgasm. It really depends on the person. So that is a process addiction. I think this is really important to understand when you talk about something like this. So we'll get back to math, but you all need to realize that, again, pornography works the same way. The chemical is just within us.
You're not going to break out into hives. You won't collapse on the ground in convulsions. You're not going to have a high fever and seizures. You aren't going to have a heart attack and die. You'll be fine. You can go without it. You might be a little bored, a little bit restless, but you will be fine.
Okay. These guys start off speaking in a very intelligent way, and then they go off. This guy's just gone off into complete bullshit. First of all, right? This guy has probably never dealt with a pornography addiction before. And you can tell he's like, you won't be, you're not going to be, you might be a little bored. You might be a little restless. No, you're not going to be just bored and restless. Okay. You will have brain fog, right? You're going to have brain fog. You're going to be irritable. You might experience a lot of anxiety. You might experience anger. Why? Well, you might experience these things because your process addiction was designed for you to medicate something, a specific emotion or situation. If you don't know how to deal with stress, And when you experience a lot of stress, a lot of cortisol release, you end up you go to view pornography. Well, when you take away pornography and that ability to deal with stress, you have to deal with stress in all its glory. But think about this, for years, you've been avoiding it. You've been avoiding dealing with what stress really is. And for the first time, you have to raw dog stress. How is it going to feel? It's going to be so discombobulating to you. Also, when you remove yourself from that, all the things that you didn't have access to are going to affect you. All right. So now you're actually having to deal with stress and all the strong emotions, sometimes traumatic, unresolved issues that you've been ignoring for a very long time. And some very, very strong emotions can come up.
You're not physically dependent on it. If you want some positive news in the culture war, since Roe v. Wade was
okay. So I think that was his cut for an ad. And I'm going to add one more thing. You are physically dependent on pornography. Anybody who's viewed pornography to the point of compulsion understands that when they end up trying to have sex, when you try to be intimate with somebody, you experience something called porn-induced erectile dysfunction. Why? Because the entire time that you've been viewing pornography, you have been doing so unnaturally. Right? Real sex involves touching, involves communication. There's that tactile part of it. There's using your sense of smell. There's seeing. Every part of your body is working together in order to make this physical thing happen. With pornography, you are training your brain to be a spectator. You watch things. And that is one of the reasons why it is a gateway to things like OnlyFans. It is a gateway to things like campsites, because you're a spectator. You like watching. It's a gateway to cold behavior. There are so many colds now. There are so many people who get off by watching their wife or their partner have sex with somebody else. Yes, there is a fetish part of it that might develop naturally for some people, but for a lot of people, they don't realize that this comes from that repeated behavior of being a spectator. And when you watch certain genres of pornography, it connects to your conditioning of racism, your conditioning of whatever it may have to do with forced sex, or your conditioning with so many other things that just lead. There's certain words I want to say, but I don't want to get banned from YouTube. So I'll just stop there. But not only does it condition you to be a spectator. All right, let's get back to Matt.
Overturned, the left has lost facilities. You can help them fight. The dollars might be enough to help you break a heroin or alcohol addiction, but probably not. And besides, you'd still suffer the potentially fatal ramifications of going cold turkey off of those substances, even if there was $1 million on the table. In other words, a fat check could not instantly release you of a true substance addiction, but it could release you of your porn addiction. With $1 million on the table, you would stop watching porn easily without any struggle.
No. Again, I think he is really minimizing this. There are men right now that I'm talking to who will give up their family and their kids for pornography. And it's not like they're doing it in a selfish way. They will make a promise that I will never view pornography again to their wife. And all you need to do is speak to any divorce lawyer, and they will tell you that one of the leading causes for divorce today is a spouse's pornography use. Yeah, there are other things, but it's up there these days. Why would somebody risk losing half their assets, their children, and the love of their life to pornography, right? Matt's talking about $1 million. There are people who have thrown away their businesses, thrown away their family. They've thrown away more than $1 million because of their behavior with pornography, and they never intended to do it. So Matt is coming from a place of greatly diminishing something. And when you don't understand something and you greatly diminish it, that's a very dangerous place to be, because that is the thing that makes you go like, yeah, let's ban pornography. Let's put it all there and burn it, because I don't think it's a problem. And I think that anybody who uses it is extremely weak. There's zero empathy there. And these are people who are not even going to try to understand. Why? Because his problem with pornography has nothing to do with the addictive impact that it has. It has nothing to do with the impact it has on people's intimacy, the fact that people are objectified. It is so obvious, or becoming obvious, that Matt Walsh's issue with pornography comes from his conservative conditioning. It comes from his issues around sex and sexuality, which comes through religion for a lot of people.
Because the incentives are that high. What that means is that these addictions are not the same, because one is an addiction and one is not. The other is a choice. It's an impulse. It's a temptation.
There we go.
You might very much enjoy watching porn. It might give you a dopamine hit. Everything you enjoy gives you a dopamine hit. That doesn't make it an addiction, though. Unless, of course, we've decided that literally everything is an addiction, which means that nothing is an addiction.
We've addressed this.
Then porn addiction is a real phenomenon. But then, in emotional dependence that interferes with daily life describes literally anything that you enjoy doing too much. And in our modern age of materialism and overindulgence, that means we all have like 50 different addictions. They are an affliction, a disease, cannot control, and therefore cannot be blamed for. That's exactly how the ashamed porn user has been conditioned to see his situation. He can't control it, he can't stop, so he doesn't. This is how everybody has been conditioned to view all of their personal flaws and
he's making a great point here, which I agree with. I think that individuals who struggle with the shame of pornography addiction have been conditioned to believe that this is something that they have no power over, that they're completely powerless over. But the truth is, you actually do have a choice, right? You do have a choice, but that doesn't make it any less of an addiction. It still makes it a process addiction. However, everybody who deals with an addiction needs to understand that there is a choice in all addictions. I want to make this clear. There is a choice in all addictions. You may not see the choice, but good recovery, the rebooting process, shows you how to see that choice. And that is the pathway to freedom for you. Okay. But I agree with him on this particular point, that just on the definition of addiction.
Sins and vices. And so we have become a society of pathetic weaklings swept along helplessly by the current, doing things, making choices while telling ourselves that we have no control over the things that we are willfully doing right now.
Interestingly enough, I agree with him on that point as well, right? We are doing something willfully, but we have conditioned ourselves to believe otherwise. I love that point. Can't really argue with it.
This is why we need to bring back a concept called simple but not easy. Remember what that one commenter said? He said, "Do you think it's easy for those who are hooked to porn to just simply stop watching porn?" The answer is no, and also yes. I don't think it's easy, but I do think it's simple.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. I'm glad I didn't end this video earlier on with a knee-jerk reaction. The moment he said simple but not easy, I would say that, like I've said that so many times, the process of ending your behavior with pornography is not easy, but it is simple. And the reason why it is simple is because you need to see beyond the conditioning of pornography and beyond what the world has told you and the world has made you believe about addictive behaviors. When you understand things like when you experience a slip or relapse, it is not a failure. It is simply data that you can use. That is simple. Slips are data. But the emotions that you feel of shame, that is the thing that does not make it easy. When you come to understand that the process of accountability will actually help you reduce your shame, when you come to understand that and you experience it, it becomes simple. But accepting accountability partners is the part of this that is not an easy thing to do. When you understand things like progress over perfection, which is one of the principles within the Porn Reboot System, that as long as you are making progress, which means that you are controlling your behavior better doesn't mean that you are not slipping. It could be that instead of simply slipping, you use one of the tools first. You raise awareness, or after you slip, you do a relapse autopsy and you find out why that happened. or while you're in the process of that addiction, the process, you suddenly gain awareness and realize that this is not helping you, and you're able to stop it. Or when you get triggered and you realize that later on you're going to view pornography, you catch yourself before that happens and you reach out to your accountability partners, or you preemptively set a boundary because you know that you're at risk. That is simple. Doing everything else is not easy. But I think a lot of the people that commented there, when they talked about it's not easy, were actually talking about that belief that an addiction is not something that can be overcome. And when you ask all these people who say that they have a porn addiction, and you ask them, do you know why it's an addiction? They can never explain why, because they're all in their feelings and you're in your emotions. You're just like, well, I just can't stop, man. I can't stop. There is no awareness of any of that. Okay. So I would say that for the most part, I don't agree with Matt Walsh, but I think when it comes to like certain principles about seeing things for the reality, the reality of the way things are, he gets it. But his views are colored and dangerous because of the place they come from. They come from a place of believing that this is a sinful thing. Therefore, it should be something that you should stop. And the implication that you are a weak, pathetic person because you're unable to stop yourself. Interestingly enough, that is the very thing that cultivates the shame that prevents us from seeking help. I hope you guys found that helpful, and I hope you watched it all the way. I would love to know your thoughts on this. Drop them in the comment section below. Thanks.